Welcome in. It's Reaction Monday on Three Man Front. Pat Landrum, Molly Conrad with you until 2 o'clock. So much to get into. Not so much about Alabama and Auburn's wins over the weekend. Basically, they were glorified scrimmages for both teams. But you know what? They get out of there healthy. They look good doing it. So both Alabama and Auburn march on as we now have 2 remaining weeks in the college football season, regular season. And Alabama on the road there in Norman, Oklahoma. Auburn will be hosting Texas A&M. So it will be something that we will be watching closely as Auburn tries to get a little bit of momentum after the win against ULM to try to get things going, possibly for a bowl game.
It was a weekend of chaos. It was not as much chaos potentially as we could have had with the likes of Oregon and others flirting with losses. But Alabama, Auburn handling their business the way that they should have, and that makes this weekend even bigger. And now when you look at this Alabama-Oklahoma game that Conrad's going to be attending there in Norman, Oklahoma, it's set up and it looked a lot different, the optics of it prior to the start of the season. It's still going to be a tough road trip, and Alabama, as we've seen all year in college football, well, it's Alabama or somebody else. You can't just roll your helmet out there and expect to win. But Alabama goes and takes care of their business. That's fine. Auburn finally is going to get a big game at night, and getting that at Jordan-Hare Stadium, and maybe win one for the Gipper, win one for your fans that have had to endure just, ugh. That's the best way to describe it, Conrad. Ugh, all season long.
Yeah, and again, it would be Hugh Freeze's biggest win at Auburn, so even if it doesn't ultimately end up in you being bowl eligible, that'd go a long way with the fan base, as you said.
Well, not only that, you get that big win if you're Hugh Freeze, but then all of a sudden that Iron Bowl conversation
it's different.
Completely changes.
It does.
The landscape, because not only we believe that game is going to Auburn, if they were to upset Alabama, would knock Alabama out of the college football playoff, and that would obviously warm the hearts of every Auburn fan in the world if that were to take place. But if you knock off Texas A&M, then that momentum and the positive nature of you not only potentially knocking all Alabama out of the CFP, but getting to a bowl game after enduring a very difficult season, that would say a lot.
If Jimbo Fisher appears to me in a dream this week and he tells me that Auburn's going to knock off Texas A&M, should I tell you guys, or let it be known on the air, or just keep it to myself?
No, definitely tell us.
No, you got to tell us.
Okay.
You got to tell us. Well, let's start there for Auburn. Auburn, good win, 48-14 over ULM. Peyton Thorne had a great afternoon, 286 passing, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. Just think if he had not thrown any interceptions earlier in the season with some of those non-conference games, perhaps Auburn would be in a better situation now. Cam Coleman, they targeted him often. He was successful, 8 receptions. His one-handed catch there at the pylon was highlight.
One of the best of the year.
Yeah, that you're going to see anywhere. 100 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. Jarquez Hunter did not quite have the output as we talked about during Pat Ponders that day, but he was effective, 14 carries, 102 yards, but over 500 yards of offense for Auburn. So a good afternoon, and the defense held the Warhawks to only 218 yards. And don't look now, but the Auburn defense, one of the top 3 or 4 in the SEC this year, statistically speaking. So the defense and DJ Durkin, they have brought it for the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah, they have. And you've got young guys who've had to contribute. You've been thin in the secondary, but especially on the defensive front, there were a lot of questions coming into the season. But he's been able to use some of those 4 or 5 stars, those young players that they sold on coming in and making an impact in year one. And not only have they made an impact, but they've gotten better as the season has gone along, and that bodes well for if DJ Durkin is still there. We expect him to be next year calling the defense. That bodes well for that side of the ball. At least you've gotten some consistency. It hasn't come in the special teams. It hasn't come on the offensive side of the ball. But for the most part, the way that, Conrad, that defensive side of the ball for Auburn has trended this season, that is 2 thumbs up, in my opinion, 2 checks in the plus column.
Yeah, I think DJ Durkin deserves a lot of credit and a lot of recognition in terms of some of the best assistant coaching jobs across the entire conference this year because, like you said, the problems offensively, people kind of cast Auburn off, and you look at their record and you go, they haven't been very impressive this year. But defensively speaking, I think DJ Durkin has done essentially everything you could have asked for him to do coming in this year. And I mean, you see a big part of why he was infamously the last interview Nick Saban ever had, and a lot of people being critical of DJ Durkin, and you saw why Auburn wanted to bring him in here. He's done a great job.
Alabama wins 52-7 over Mercer. Jalen Milroe, 11 of 16, 186 yards passing, 2 touchdowns. He ran the ball 6 times for 43 yards and a 3-yard touchdown. Ryan Williams, Just like Cam Coleman, he was targeted early and often. He had 2 touchdowns, 1 rushing, 1 receiving. The Bama defense, that has continued to me to be the big second half story of this Alabama football team. For that Monday that we came in here and so many questions about Kane Womack, there were questions whether he was going to be able to make it through the season. I mean, that's no lie. There was already conversations about who potentially was really calling the defensive schemes after the first half of the season. But this Bama defense, they forced 3 turnovers. Xavier Brown's returned fumble, a 68 yards for a touchdown. 5th straight game that Alabama's defense has had 3+ turnovers. That's just incredible. They held Mercer to 202 total yards, only 62 rushing. Jahad Campbell continues to make a lot of money every Saturday because this kid, his stock continues to go north from NFL scouts. He had 9 tackles and a sack on Saturday. But for Kalen DeBoer after the game, he was pretty blunt. It was a clean game, no turnovers, takeaways by the defense, no injuries. A lot of young players got to see game action. Matter of fact, walk-on quarterbacks were getting into the game playing for Alabama. So overall, it was just a really good day for the Alabama football team and the Auburn football team. No injuries. They were able to go out, do their jobs, and get out of there with a win.
Yeah, that's what these Saturdays are about, right? Late in the season, you don't want to, the big thing is nobody got hurt, and you got to give a lot of guys opportunities, especially, it was cool after the Alabama game seeing some of the veteran guys like Booker and some of them kind of go out of their way to acknowledge the walk-ons and the 3rd and 4th string guys that, kind of win the day for them in practice, right? A lot of those guys run the scout team.
Did you like Max pass in the corner of the end zone?
See why they wanted to bring him over from Washington, but it was cool to see guys get opportunities. I mean, even a guy that, does a pretty thankless job a lot of times.